Namaskaram to all. Welcome to Clyde Samvada, brought to you by the Hindu Temple of Scotland. What you saw at the start is a short brief on what happens at the Anaadi Foundation's Gurukulam. And we have with us today Matrushri Anantalakshmi, who is one of the co-founders of the Anaadi Foundation itself and the Gurukulam. So today's episode, we will go deeper into the interesting curriculum that they have developed around the intersection of IKS, which is Indian knowledge systems, and the intersection of that with science and technology. When I heard about it, it was very fascinating for me because the intersection at the level of depth in terms of having a structured curriculum and a structured pedagogy, all of that, at least for me, was hearing for the first time. So it was very interesting for me to learn more about it, and through the process, others can also learn more about what they have been doing. Namaste, Matushi ji, and welcome to Clyde Samvada.
Namaste ji, namaste. Very happy to be part of this conversation and very happy to note all the wonderful work that you have been doing and very happy to be on this podcast.
Thank you, ji. So maybe we start at how Anaadi Foundation started, that sort of backstory, and then we can go deeper into the IKS STEM intersection.
So we started the foundation, Anaadi Foundation, in 2015. Anaadi in Sanskritam means that which does not have a beginning. So we do find the reference in Bhagavad Gita. We also find many references of Anaadi in the Tirumandiram, which is a Tamil text given by Tirumular, who is a Siddha in the 18th Siddha tradition. And also the reason being that we can say that it did not have a characteristic beginning that way because it's an extension of work that we had been doing for many years. So before starting the foundation, my husband and I were both professors of computer science at Amrita University, Coimbatore. And we used to follow something called the open door policy. We used to live on campus. So our house was open for students to come right from 4:30 in the morning to say 10 o'clock in the night, where some used to come for sadhana, some used to come for playing with our children, some used to come for Linux hacking, and many such things. And then Anaadi Foundation, of course, is an extension of all of that. The journey into the spiritual process began when my husband Sriman Adinarayanan, he graduated in the US, from North Carolina State University. And in between, completing his graduation and then taking up a job, there was this brief Sandhya period where he had a deep spiritual experience. At that time, he did not have exposure to the Shastra, so he was trying to decode it with modern psychology and all of that. But of course, couldn't find any answers in psychology books. But when he turned to Bhagavad Gita and the Yoga Sutra, he understood that what he had gone through was the state of Samadhi. And of course, right after that, he came back to Bharat and we were married and worked briefly in the software industry. And we used to joke that no matter 15, 16 hours we work in the computer, that thing wouldn't get inspired at all. Of course, now you have AI and all, you can infuse a little bit of inspiration into the computer. But then it used to be, a dumb terminal, you can say, call it that way. And we were, for more than 10 years, we were in the university, and then we were also offering courses on Mahabharata, ancient sciences and technology and all of that. And since many years, Sriman Adinarayan also spent some good amount of time in Mauna for about 30, 40 days in a go. Now he spent more than 300, 400 days in Mauna. And then in one of the Mauna sessions, he had a deep agnya to serve the youth of the country and of course of the world. And then we started Anaadi Foundation in 2015. Our ashram is located near Palani in Tamil Nadu. Palani is a Siddha Kshetra, Kartikeya Sthala, one of the 6 main centers of Kartikeya. And we have a Goshala, we have a Gurukulam, we have a Dhyanalayam. And we have about 40 cows which help us to lead a sustainable life, given all the, the energy crisis that we are seeing, whatever is going on in the world right now. Somehow we managed in the past 2 years to eliminate the use of, these LPGs and all of that, completely using sustainable fuel. Many of them express interest to come and stay at the ashram because LPG has been cut off at home. So that kind of a thing. And then, of course, we also started the Gurukulam in 2021 because during the pandemic, many parents started to observe what their children were learning as part of the school because now the online sessions were going on. And then they felt somewhere that there is a disconnect between what is the real world society and what is offered as part of education. Of course, the modern education is serving the larger masses, but then if somebody wants to switch, there seem to be very limited options. So we said, okay, let us start a Gurukula in 2021. So just as a child goes through, in the modern context, goes through education which has language, mathematics, science, and social sciences, we sort of built a curriculum with the Bharatiya equivalents of these. And then we center the Gurukula around the Panchakoshiya Vikas. So when we look at the Taittiriya Upanishad and of course the Tattva Bodha of Adi Shankaracharya, the detailed account of what is Panchakosha and how we are Panchakosha Atita, we are beyond the Panchakosha is mentioned there. So when we look at the Panchakosha, you have the Annamaya, Pranamaya, Manomaya, Vijnanamaya and Anandamaya to do with the physical, the vital, the emotional, the cognitive and the spiritual and aesthetic dimensions. So what we did was whether it is the Dinacharya routine or whether it's the curriculum or in fact whether it's even the evaluation, we base it on the Panchakoshiya Vikas as to how the child has developed on all these dimensions. So now what in June we are expanding to about 16 such centers of which 2 will be residential, 2 or 3 will be residential, the rest will be non-residential, catering right from 2.5 years of age up to 17 years of age. And if any child wants to do college education as well, they can enroll in an online program and stay with us and contribute along multiple dimensions. So that is sort of the beginningless beginning of Anaadi Foundation.
I mean, like in a way, Anadi means beginningless. So kind of having it that way is super interesting. And the journey itself is super interesting, right? The fact that you were computer science to coming into IKS is sort of where the world is in many ways. That intersection in many ways between AI and what needs to go into AI in terms of training, how AI will influence the future of human life. All these intersections are core to where life is going. And so it's extremely pertinent that we have this conversation with you to have both perspectives in some way coming into the conversation. If we kind of go back to Anadi Foundation itself, in terms of you mentioned about the fact that you're now opening up multiple Gurukulams in different parts. Uh, how do you see the future? Where all are these planned internationally? Sure, and how do you see technology intersecting with these future plans of Anadi Foundation?
Yeah. First, I'll probably show the IKS STEM platform just maybe 2-3 minutes and then go into this. So we have this Anaadi IKS STEM Academy where we bring the science, technology, engineering, mathematic aspects of Indian knowledge systems. The STEM Academy as such is a platform with a lot of courses across the age groups, including adults, whereas the Anaadi I Gurukulam is a more immersive journey for children from 8 years onwards. So we have these courses on Ayurveda, Leelavati, on Nakshatra Vidya, which is astronomy, Siddha knowledge systems, temple architecture, Rasa Shastra, and all of these courses. And let me go through one of these courses. Let's take, since we have been speaking
Super
about
detailed. Like, yeah, I'm like, okay, I should first enroll myself on this. Okay.
Yes. So when we take the Leelavati Kshetra Ganita, which is basically geometry, this takes up verses from Bhaskaracharya's Leelavati, which talk about geometry. So when we look at this, what is geometry? Where does this word come from? A lot of this knowledge is given here. And say, for example, you have the square and rhombus. So what are the different types of quadrilaterals? So here the verse is Atulya Karnabhir Hatir Vibhakta Phalam Sputam Tulya Chaturbhuje Syat Samashruto Tulya Chaturbhuje Cha Tathayate Tad Bhujakoti Ghataha. So here it says, in a quadrilateral with equal sides, the product of the unequal diagonals divided by 2 is the area, and the rectangle, of course, length into breadth. So here what we do is that we don't stop here. We have a simulator that shows how a area of a rhombus is found. So you basically rearrange it into a rectangle. And this is why you have D1 into D2 by 2. Okay. And then let me show you triangle area. Again, we have the source verse here. Then you have the simulator. And this is how a triangle's area is found out. So it becomes
Oh, like a
transformed into
rectangle.
a rectangle, and you
Nice.
get half into base into height. Okay.
Okay.
And we don't just stop here. What we do is that we go into the source verses. Okay. So are you able to hear the audio?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So in the smart learn aspect, so for example,
You can then get them to chant it themselves
yeah,
and repeat along with
yeah,
it.
just
Oh, nice.
प्रीतिं भक्तजनस्य यो जनयते
Oh, it's sort of live analyzing it and then saying how well you have done it and all of that.
विघ्नं विनिघ्नं स्मृतः. I just gave it in. So it is showing that
Yeah,
I
got it.
chanted it wrongly and it is
And some
asking
part.
me to do it again.
Okay. And this is all at the back, AI analyzing it, I suppose, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. We
Yeah,
have
okay.
some models that analyze this, and we have also a practice
Okay.
session and all of that. So, like this, we have
Super
like
interesting.
hundreds of simulations
And
across
content
the
like
various courses. Like for
this is
example, what is a
fascinating.
tithi?
Yeah. Yeah.
We have a simulator here which shows the tithi. So, for
Okay.
example, you have Shukla Paksham, Amavasya,
Oh,
and
nice.
then what is the shape of the moon
Shape of
across
the
the.
moon according to that. Wow, nice. Okay.
Yeah. So all of this developed in-house at the ashram in collaboration with the Gurukula Vidyarthis, the Gurukula Acharyas, and all of
So this
them.
is the
So
student project, like students kind of created these
students
as projects.
also a part of that. Major part is by the adults, but
Adults.
students
Yeah, okay.
sort of record like what is the best way to show it to a child. So they work on that.
Ah,
They
got
do
it.
the designs. We also have some
Okay.
projects that the children themselves have done where, for example, they do a Prakriti analysis and according to the location, they give you a diet chart and all of that.
Oh,
Then there is also a project on the various ragas that you can learn according to the mood and all of that. So, similarly, we have the student projects going on, we have hackathons. And once
okay.
the child learns a verse in mathematics, we have a course called Ganita and Computing where they write a small Python code explaining the verse. So usually when a child learns programming, they learn it like what is the greatest of three numbers, or they're given a modern context to solve. So
Yeah.
here they give an
Right.
ancient Indic context to solve. Could be
Hmm.
Ayurveda, could be Nakshatra Vidya, like finding the position
Hmm.
of the moon according to the tithi, something like that. We will.
Yeah, like the example context is not somebody running and finding the speed at which they're going. It's instead of that, what's the radius of the sun and then calculating
Exactly.
nakshatras as a function of radius
Exactly.
of things. Yeah, super interesting. Nice.
Yes.
Yeah, this is definitely fascinating. And just kind of going back to where you are taking this in terms of the online content. I mean, like I didn't realize the depth of what you have already built. This is super fascinating. How are you kind of planning to take this? What is the response that you've had from global learners? Because this
So
seems to
in
be
the
like
for the
a
first 2 months itself, we had like about 1,000 learners onboarded onto this. So we have good. We are also tying up with various institutions to take it further.
Hmm.
Maybe 100,000 people can be onboarded onto this. And of course, the physical Gurukulas. Right now, we have residential at Palani. We
Hmm.
have a non-residential in Hyderabad, and we have Bala Gurukulam's preschool age group in Bangalore and all of that. By
Mm-hmm.
June, we are expanding this to 16 such systems. We also have a Veda Patashala in Prayagraj. So we are going
Okay.
to expand this a couple of centers in Telangana and
Mm-hmm.
then in Bangalore as well. And of course, we will have the residential in Palani. So overall, we are looking at about 16 centers, one in Coimbatore as well. Yeah.
This is
So yeah,
all in India. And what's your global plan like?
yeah, so we have a couple of the weekend Gurukulas, to be Gurukulas kind of a thing. Eventually, they will become full-time Gurukulas. We have it in Malaysia and Singapore. And
Okay.
we also have, inspired by Anaadi's work, we have a collaborative Tattva Academy in Texas, Austin,
Okay.
which is basically based on the IKS, but then blended with the Texas curriculum as well,
Okay.
catering to the outcomes there. And
Okay.
in Europe, we are planning to start the weekend kendras, which are IKS kendras. And then if there is
Mm.
interest and there is regulatory, what you can say, support, then some
Mm.
such more non-residential things can also be started wherever there is a possibility.
That's great to know. I mean, like, I'm looking forward to first exploring the online one myself to understand sort of self-learn there first, And then it definitely be interesting to see where else, like let's say in Scotland where we're doing this, or other places like that, would definitely be exploring those sort of opportunities, because this seems like practical in terms of what it's being, the way it is being done, and linking it to examples from Indic use cases is a very practical way of applying it also. So super interesting to learn more about it and explore this going forward. Next, maybe can you take us through the day in the life of a student at the Gurukulam, and how is their daily routine linked to the Panchakoshas, and how is technology maybe brought into their daily life?
So typically, a Gurukula Vidyarthi who comes to the residential Gurukula, they come at about 11 years of age, and then they can spend time, as I told you, up to grade 12 and beyond if required. Because younger children, they need to be with their parents, so we accept only at the age of 11, though 11 is also quite young that way. But at least they can make some decisions on their own. They can take care of their needs and all of that at that particular age. So typically in the Gurukula, the children wake up at around say 5 or 5:30 in the morning. Some children even wake up much earlier. And what they do is that they have a small yoga session or a chanting session or a pranayama session in the morning, a short spell. And then they go into what we have the Guru Puja. When we say Gurukula, it is the Guru's Kula. It is the Kula of the Guru Parampara. So then they are, through the various processes, they understand the connection, with the larger Guru Parampara. Each one may belong to different sampradayas. That's not a problem. But then they also understand, what is the significance of a Guru Parampara through the Upasana process itself. And then they have the Go Puja and Go Seva. So Go Mata is daily worshipped at the Gurukulam. And not just that, they take care of activities which lead to a sustainable living within the Gurukula. So that's the Go Seva part. And then they have a much more elaborate yogic session where they learn various asanas, pranayama. They also learn various shatkriyas, including, say, dhauti, jalaneti, and all of that. Very advanced practices they learn over a period of time. The younger children will learn simple asanas. As they grow older, they develop the capability. And post that, they have the learning sessions. And then in the afternoon, since they wake up early in the afternoon, they have a half an hour of yoga nidra session where they get into deep relaxation. Nowadays you hear CEOs talking about, non-sleep, deep relaxation and all of that, right? NSDR.
Yeah, REM sleep, all of
REM
that. Yeah.
sleep. Yeah. So this REM sleep, the non-REM and REM sleep, the non-REM sleep especially helps you to, sort of digest the experiences and bring you to a certain state of relaxation. And Yoga Nidra helps you to go to a deep state, whereas still that awareness is maintained. And after the Yoga Nidra session, again, they have the curricular lessons as well. And towards the evening, they have Krida and Krishi, where they take care of plants, play games. Evening, they have bhajans and Guru Puja in a much more elaborate manner. Just before going to bed, they have the Swadhyaya session, which is a self-learning session. Younger children, if they feel asleep, that's okay. Fall asleep, it's okay. They are free to go. But whoever wants to study, they spend the 1 hour or 1.5 hours studying. And when we come to the knowledge sessions, as I told you, like the mainstream school, the children study language, math, science, and social sciences. Here, our Gurukula Vidyarthis study Bhasha, like Sanskritam and English, of course. And they also learn the sciences in terms of Ayurveda, the yogic sciences. And they also are introduced to principles from Rasa Shastra, like, how do we have a small chemistry lab using the principles of Rasa Shastra. And they achieve, in fact, very high temperatures just using what is called the putam, or the cow dung balls are arranged in a certain manner according to Rasa Shastra, and they achieve very high temperatures through that, which is typically like the furnaces and crucibles and all of that, right? And they also learn after a while, when they are about, say, 12, 13 years, they're also introduced to the philosophical systems, the Darshana Shastras. Because, we often talk at Anaadi about the full stack Bharatiya Drishti, having a tech background. I think this full stack word comes from there. So the outward product is, of course, there, which they can use, like an application could be, say, an Ayurvedic Kashayam, right? Of course, there is a science behind that, which comes from the Ayurvedic sciences. And there is an underlying philosophy underneath it, which is basically the Nyaya Vaisheshika, philosophy that on which the Ayurvedic knowledge is built upon. And underlying that, of course, there is a theology to it in terms of the Itihasa, Purana, the Upasana, Dhanavantri, Mantra, and all of that. The Vedas, basically, Ayurveda comes from the Vedas. It's the Vedic knowledge system. So the entire spectrum of this helps them to build the Bharatiya Drishti. So, for example, when we decode a disease in the modern language, we would say that this is a lifestyle disease, this is a communicable disease, this is caused by virus, this is caused by bacteria or something else, right? So similarly, when they decode a particular vyadhi or whatever, they decode it through the lens of, say, Ayurveda and Siddha, as the imbalance of the doshas, as a difficult or a problem with the dhatus. So they decode it that way, and they decode it for Manushya, Pashu, and Vriksha, for a human, for an animal, and for a plant. In fact, very interestingly, in Ayurveda, the frameworks are the same. The Vata, Pitta, Kapha is also used to look at the animal diseases, also used to look at the plant diseases, and more or less how we treat it is very similar. So these are the knowledge systems that they get deeper introduction to. And one very interesting component is, of course, the astronomy. So generally, a modern education system, we are only used to the calendar that we look at, right? In terms of the days, the months, and all of that. But nobody actually goes into what is a day, what is a month, what is a year. When we say 2026, what is 2026? When we say March, what is March? When we say 15th March or 16th March, what is 16th March? These are not brought out. We learn it much later. So when we do at the Gurukula, we use the source text, and then they learn to calculate various positions of the planets, the grahas. So at any point in time, they can locate the grahas mathematically. So that requires knowledge of foundational mathematics as well as spherical trigonometry. They also construct various yantras or astronomical instruments to make the various observations. So that way,
that
when
is
we
super
say,
interesting.
yeah, so that way, when we say Gurukula education, it's not something like, trying to make them go to the Stone Ages, but rather very futuristic that way, where the mental models are now translated into physical models that way, which involves geometry, trigonometry, and algebra, and all of that.
Yeah, like the way you're presenting it is like, yes, I know algebra, I know trigonometry, but then like the intersection of that with the stars and with the yantra is like when you see the yantra, you can sort of guesstimate, but then the logic to that, like it's super interesting. I mean, like I would probably like to sit on this course myself first to understand
This
how
is
this works.
almost
I mean, so
the first thing that
yeah,
all parents say. Do you have
yeah.
a seat for us in the Gurukula?
Yeah, correct. Like before the students, like yeah, I should be the first student at the Gurukulam myself. I mean, so super fascinating. So when you were talking about chemistry and the intersection of that gave me like multiple interesting questions. So one is chemistry, and when I did my chemistry in my school, typically the chemistry element there was about specific chemicals and how the chemicals react and all of that, right? So now, how do you translate that side of it and bring it into a Gurukulam system? Would be something that would be interesting to know more about.
So in terms of the modern chemistry, of course, because we also follow the open schooling curriculum, they are introduced to the modern chemistry in terms of the periodic table and the various chemical reactions, organic chemistry, and all of that. That happens for sure. But when we look at the ancient Indian texts, could be Siddha text, could be Ayurvedic text, also Rasa Shastra text. Very briefly, it's not like they can become a Siddha from that. See, when we studied in school, we studied to the level of a school child, right? Decoding various elements around us. So that part happens where they are introduced to various minerals, the names of the minerals, and how they form various compounds, and even using plant-based things and how chemicals are created out of that. Those kind of things. The main part is, of course, preparation of the yantras. Say, for example, if it is a distillation process. If you look at the Rasa Shastra part of it, most of the instruments or equipments are designed out of mud. They are pottery basically. So here the children learn to build their own kilns, build their own pottery, or have their own pots, and then they learn to make these equipments as well. So even if you have, say, for example, lemongrass, you can distill and then create something out of that. So those are the kind of processes that they are introduced to.
Okay, super interesting. And that is the science part. Now, when you come to the maths part, when you talk about the geometry of an entra and the trigonometry linked to that,
Yeah.
how do you make it into like a structured curriculum? Like the entra is like one example of it, but how do you kind of structure that into like a curriculum and the pedagogy, and how do you integrate both worlds?
The beauty about the Bharatiya pedagogy is that the rishi who created that text or knowledge system themselves would have thought about a certain pedagogy. So we have to just latch on to that. For example, if we take the Yoga Sutra, the Yoga Sutra would start with the highest state to be achieved, say, for example, Samadhi. But then, what prevents you from the what sort of is an obstacle? Probably they would talk about the kleshas or the vrittis. The removal or the cessation of the vrittis is the state of yoga. Then the natural question arises in the mind of the listener. Okay, what is vritti? Then the sutra would go into what is a vritti. Then the five vrittis. Then the question
When
arises.
you say vritti, like just a dummy's question, when
Yeah.
you say vritti, klesha is more like barrier. Vritti is how do you overcome
Vritti
that?
is
Is
the
that
mental processes. Viparyaya, Vikalpa, Nidra, Smriti. These are the five vrittis that the Yoga Sutra talks about. All the things that are going on in your chitta. When we say pramana, valid knowledge is something that you're processing. Suppose I see an apple, I'm perceiving it's an apple, right? So that is a valid thing that is going on. Suppose I see an apple and think it's a pear, it's a misconception. That is also happening in my chitta, right? So all these processes are happening in my chitta. I am storing the knowledge. Smriti is happening. I am imagining things. Vikalpa is happening, and all of that. So the question you said a dumb question. It's not a dumb question. The moment I told vritti, your natural question of what do you mean by vritti, right? So the Yoga Sutra itself, the next sutra talks about what are the vrittis. And then when you now you have a question, when I say pramana, then your question will be like, okay, what is pramana? Then the next sutra is what is pramana. So the pedagogy itself lends its to this kind of a methodology. So similar, what we do is that is why we rely on the source text of say Ayurveda. They directly learn the verses from the source text, right? And for example, the best part about the Indian knowledge system is most of the source texts are written in the form of chandas, metrical verses, which you can memorize. So an Ayurveda Vaidya has probably memorized thousands of verses of Ashtanga Hridayam or Charaka Samhita, and that is how they recollect the body of knowledge. Mathematics, we use the text called Leelavati. Our Vidyarthis, right from the age of 2.5 years of age, they memorize the Leelavati. And when they have to apply, they would apply it. The way some of the texts are written is that in context of mathematics, the algebraic identities come from the geometric identities. So if you say a plus b the whole square is equal to a square plus b square plus 2ab, what it means is that you take a particular figure, you divide it into a and b, the sides. So you will have two squares, whatever, right? So
yeah?
one part will be a square, one part will be b square. You will have one AB and one AB. So totally it will be A square plus B square plus 2AB. So the verse itself is designed to give the geometric identity, and then through that the child learns of the other processes. And the calculations also come through that. For example, let us take the squaring a number. So when we say 15 square, you have 225. Then you have, say, 25 square, 625. 35 square, people will feel stuck because they are not used to doing the square. Right? But Bhaskaracharya, in one of his methods, says the last digit you have a square, so you'll write 25. The first digit you multiply it with its next number, right? So it is 3 into 4. So it is 12. So the answer is 1225. When we say 45 square, it is 25 at the end, 4 into 5, 2025. 65 square, 4225. But that comes from the geometric identity. So that is how the mathematical pedagogy is designed at the Gurukula.
That's
And through
very
that,
interesting. I mean,
yeah,
so this sort of like this is like mental mathematics, Vedic mathematics element of it. Like how is this structured across, let's say, year one of class, year two of class? Like how is the intersection between what we have in the regular school and the corresponding element of that here? How does the two worlds integrate?
yeah. What we do is that the Leelavati text itself, the first part of it is called the Parikarmashtakam, which is the 8 operations the child has to learn at an early age. So this is the 8 operations are addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, square, square root, cube, and cube root. So normally we don't, in a regular school, we don't learn cube root, at an early stage. We learn it much later. So you would see that when the children go through the Bharatiya math curriculum, somewhere they will go ahead of what is there in the mainstream school. Because the verses, there will be a sudden jump over there in the text itself, right? So like that we follow the paddhati where, say for example, the NCERT or the Common Core curriculum has defined some cognitive levels. At this level, the child will learn, say, area of the various figures. We sort of take inspiration from that and find out where the verses are in the various texts and introduce them to that, so that things can go parallelly in a way. So we have developed our own like pedagogy and staged
Pedagogy.
curriculum around that.
Nice. And you also now have an online version of it, right? So one is what happens in your physical Gurukulam, where you kind of took us through what happens in the day of the life of the student. In the online variant of it, how could somebody in not in the physical Gurukulam engage with some of this content? Because I'm sure this is definitely going to be of interest for people beyond that also. So how has that space developed, and how is the curriculum and structure, the content brought into an online Gurukulam setting?
Correct. There is no replacement, of course, for the physical teaching, but we do understand there are constraints of how much one can come and engage with this. But nevertheless, the knowledge that is given by our rishis should reach as many people as possible. Technology is the most favorite scaling tool available. Of course, we can create hundreds of acharyas over a period of time, make them travel and do all the sessions. But right now, technology is, of course, a very powerful tool that way to bring this to a large section of the society. So we've done two things. One, of course, we have published a set of 16 to 17 books on Indian knowledge systems, mainly for children, right from the age of about 3 years of age or 5 years of age, preschool level, right from that
Nice.
to adults as well. So
Okay.
we have the primer series, which is for adults. We have it on Ayurveda, Nakshatra Vidya, which is astronomy, and the science of yoga. We have
Okay.
the Bharatiya Vijnana Pravesha series, which is for 11 plus years children. And we have Samskara Journal, which is a habits journal. So wherever we travel in the globe, many parents ask like, okay, how do I introduce some of these, habits in my child? So we developed this journal called Samskara, which is for about 3 to 4 months of various activities you can do and record like a journal. You can go to a temple, you can go to a sthala, you can learn about your own kula devata. You have to find out from your own parents. You have to understand your family tree 3 generations up and then right. Basically, the framework that we have used is the Panchamaha Yagna. The Panchamaha Yagna are, in terms of the Brahma Yagna, the Deva Yagna, the Pitra Yagna,
Petra.
Manushya Yagna, and all of the Bhuta Yagna. So, on all these dimensions, for the Pitras, we have like know about your ancestors. For Daiva, we have like going to a temple. For the Rishis, we have knowing the knowledge system is our contribution to the Rishis. And for the Manushya is, engaging in compassion and kindness based activities. And of course, the other Bhuta Yagna is in terms of the nature, other animals, how do you serve them. So, on all these dimensions, we have the samskaras that the child can go through. And we
Okay.
have for younger children, we have something called amazing IKS, just drawing,
Mhm.
coloring, but
Mhm.
also engaging in Ganita, Nakshatra Vidya, and all of that. But we have hidden some nice, like, what do you call in computer science? We used to have these Easter eggs or the fortune cookies kind of a
Yeah,
thing.
yeah, yeah, like
We have
games.
hidden,
Yeah.
yeah, we have hidden Tarkashastra frameworks and all of that into these as well, right?
That's
Without
super
burdening.
interesting because like the in many ways how this podcast started was we were doing elements like this here. Like we were beginning to just talk about like in short bits. Like we would have one session where we were talking about like slokas, like Vishnu Sahasranamam or something like that. And then at the end of it for 10 minutes, we were beginning to introduce like Pancha Yajna, things like that.
Wonderful.
And when we were beginning to do that, that's when the first question came, right? It's just like, okay, you're teaching this to kids, and the parents are saying, okay, we don't know this ourselves either, so why don't you just do it in a way where we can consume it at whatever time we can consume it at, and that's how this sort of started. So when you're saying that, that's super interesting.
In fact, towards that, I also sort of had an insight which I now share with people. That who can answer the questions, right? So many parents or teachers feel very inadequate when they comes to Indian knowledge system. Like, even I don't know, like, how will I answer my child and all of that. But let's take a modern example. Let's say Wi-Fi, right? If the child asks, how does a Wi-Fi work? The parent will say, see, Wi-Fi is basically, it helps you to connect to the internet without a wire or something. If a techie parent will go into more details. But then the child will go to the teacher. The teacher will explain to the extent of electronics and physics or whatever it is. It will be the communication engineer at the end who will say this is the IEEE standard for wireless, fidelity, and Wi-Fi
Yeah,
people. I think they have forgotten the expansion of Wi-Fi. What?
yeah, Wi-Fi also, yeah.
Yeah. Right. So basically, even when it comes to IKS, if the parent, it's a process of growth. It's not the onus only of the parent or the teacher to answer the questions. There are acharyas, there are gurus, and eventually one leads. This minor introduction leads to that stage. Not everybody goes to the communication engineer straight away, right? We only rely on our parents. Even if it is half baked, non-wired connection, we are okay with that answer.
Yeah, yeah.
uh, Half truth, or what you can say, tending to the truth, maybe, right? And then we go deeper. I become interested in, say, a PhD in wireless
Yeah.
communication. That's when I actually
Go very
came.
deep into it. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So no
yeah.
problem if we are only half knowledge if we have at the moment, because whatever it's still good enough. That is the approach as of now we take, because most of it is lost somewhere. Knowledge is available, the access somehow is not available. So I think whatever we know, as long as it is interesting, useful, and not the false, I think it should still be okay. Yeah.
That brings me also to the point of the intersection of technology more deeply. And if we can kind of come more specifically to AI, that's sort of like the big elephant in the room in many ways, right? Like what's the intersection of that with what the future of life is going to be? We've had like couple of conversations in the past where we have kind of talked about what this might look like. I mean, what will the Purusharthas look like? How would you integrate AI with Hinduism? So you have kind of been in both sides, right? Like you have been like a computer science PhD. So that's like the epitome of when it comes to understanding AI. And then you are now at the Anaadi Foundation, which is sort of trying to do IKS at its epitome, right? So how do you see this intersection play out, both from what do you think AI can bring to Hinduism, or in terms of use cases of what might be developed around IKS using AI, and how do you see thought from Hinduism being brought to AI development, both sides?
So as you rightly said, like, I told you my husband Shivan Adinarayan has been a Linux hacker, a kernel level programmer and all of that. So that way, in-depth view of, say, networking, computer architecture, operating system, and all of that, which has led to all of this AI in a way. That understanding, foundational understanding, is already there. And that is when, there are two approaches. I've generally seen people who work in a company for a very long time, and at the end of the retirement, they are extremely bitter about the whole landscape, or they retire in a very graceful manner. So even after knowing all the algorithms and all of that, we are the kind of people who are not very bitter about technology. We always look forward to the exciting things that it opens up for the future. And that is where the IKS or the Gurukula or the Hinduism perspective becomes important, because it builds in certain very strong ethical and value frameworks, which guide you to the right use of such technologies. For example, imagine a child playing games in an immersive learning experience, right? Now a lot of these games are created with immersive. In fact, some of the highest paid jobs are in the gaming industry. So if you're a computer science graduate, you
Yeah, yeah.
end up in the
That's where
gaming
money is
industry.
made, really. Yeah,
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 that's where money is made. And in fact, our attention is their money, right? You're
yes.
you're scrolling through a feed. If you stay longer in the feed for say 2 or more seconds. Unlike your mother who's going to come and tell you, don't look at that, the algorithm is going to tell you that look more,
Continue looking at
more,
it. Yeah.
yeah, look more of it, right? So that's how the algorithm is going to work. But given all of that, so given in an immersive experience, the same moral, legal, ethical frameworks, regulatory frameworks will not apply in that immersive game. So you can actually do some things in the immersive gaming verse, which may not have the same consequences as doing something in the real world. So the differentiation between the Panchabhautika world and the virtual world has to be somewhere understood by the student or the learner or the young child who is growing up in such things. Like, for example, I
Mm-hmm.
have two sons. The one is in what we call as Gen Z, and the other one is Gen Alpha.
Okay.
Between these two itself, there is a huge difference in how they look at the world, what concerns them, and all of that. Right. So then the Gen Alphas might need an even more stronger framework because now they are growing up with this immersive
All technology all around. Yeah. Yeah.
technology. Yeah. Like I remember when my younger son was born, and after say 1.5 years or so, he naturally did a touchscreen swipe. Like he did not look
Mm.
for a button, or he did not,
Yeah. Yes,
what.
yeah, like our daughter does the same thing. Like, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Yeah. So something is there, wiring, you say digital native or, AI
Yeah.
native or whatever it is. In
Yeah.
fact,
Yeah.
we joke that they are the Gen Zs and Alphas, and Shriman and I are the Gen AIs. So a bit more
That's a nice
advanced.
way of putting it. Nice way of putting it. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah. So that way, these value frameworks become important. And
okay.
then,
When you think of the value framework, that is more in terms of guiding the AI development. And in fact, like we were at some point talking to who we are. They are a
yeah, correct.
virtual
I know.
reality startup based in Bangalore, right?
Ajit,
So
Ajit ji.
Ajit ji. So Ajit ji was telling us about how Bhavishya Purana
Hmm.
is an integral part of their employee handbook, and in fact is setting guardrails around technology, because he said gaming and you said immersive. He exactly said that, right? He said like, okay, I know this is immersive tech, and the logic of immersive tech, I come from a bit of a gaming background, so I understand what the games are meant to do. But the point is, when I started this, I was getting guided by Bhavishya Purana in setting guardrails around it. It's there, my employee handbook. He literally shared the employee handbook. Like, see, there's 2 pages of employee handbook, which is all about Bhavishya Purana inspired tech guardrails, right? So what you say is definitely resonating in terms of what Hinduism can bring, especially when it comes to ethics, responsibility, tech guardrails, all of that.
And the
And
content as such, the content of the AI, what do you call that, the language models or whatever it is, there is also a good scope to infuse some of this. We do see there is a huge gap in terms of what it can. Some domains, okay, it's very comfortably, it gives all the knowledge because it's in the public domain, but many of the domains are still not public because either the manuscripts have not been, like, digitized and transcribed and all of that. Still there is a vacuum in those knowledge systems. So I'm sure, see, when the world, when AI grows, there will be all the camps that are, guiding it. There will be the negative
yeah,
forces, there will be the
yeah,
positive forces who say that, how to appropriately use that. So that is how I see how AI is going to impact our lives. But what we need to be mindful is how it will impact the chitta of the individual.
cognition, as
Cognition,
in cognition.
cognitive executive functions like, say, memory, decision making, language learning, and say attention and all of that. And that is a space that really IKS can help, because we have yogic tools, we have methodologies to enhance the human cognition despite all the distractions that are. Okay, one can question, why do you need that level of cognition? That can always
Mm.
be questioned. Why do you need so
Yeah,
much
yeah.
memory? I mean,
Mm.
memory is now
Memory is
offered in
there at the other side, like what? Yeah.
yeah, exactly. But then there is still a gap over there. But then again, when you look at it, when you look at how AI is designed, you have, of course, the memory component of it, you have the compute power, and then you have the energy requirements as well. And of course, the world does not have infinite energy. So even there, some sustainable solutions that also can draw from the tradition can help in some way. So I think at all levels there is a scope to contribute, to participate, at the same time have a ethical framework around how we use some of these technologies. But I think it's an exciting future to look forward to that way.
And on that, like there's two segments, right? Like if you listen to the Elon Musks of the world, their answer to the energy solution is we will get energy from the space, right? And it's apparently solar is much more efficient in the space, and so we will solve for the energy problem there. So that's there. But if we really talk about the first two parts, right, like which is really the content part, if you can maybe dive deeper into the content and the cognition intersection, in the sense that why do we need the higher cognition? We were beginning to touch upon that. Like, can you kind of go deeper on what does IKS bring to both unlocking the cognition as well as uh, preserving the value of the cognition and what that value has in an AI world?
So I was talking to a neuroscientist, and he mentioned, like, we have when you take the human brain, you if you stack the neurons one on top of the other, you will
Mm-hmm.
reach halfway up to the moon, and each neuron can have about 10,000 bits of information. Of course, I didn't verify, but I'm just sharing anyway. So it means that you can store at least 10 sahasranamas in one neuron. So that is the level
Mm-hmm.
of capabilities that the human has. But with this
Mm-hmm.
process, definitely we there is a lot to lose. For example, in the future, more and more aspects of, say, Alzheimer's and dementias can get very amplified if we don't have explicit processes to train the memory, right?
Cognition.
So
Interesting.
that is lifestyle diseases can be quite an issue. For
Mm-hmm.
example, people can ask, like, why do you need a weaver? Now we have machines to weave, but then we also have limitations of how, say, nylon clothing or whatever impacts your body or how you function. Or now many things are being uncovered about the food that we eat.
Mm-hmm.
Processed food, many people will say, like, why do you need to cook? You have processed food. But then we do see
Mm-hmm.
how it leads to lifestyle disorders. So I think
Mm-hmm.
the world is yet to think that far and project all the goodness and harm that will come out of AI. Now it is in an experimental exciting phase where whatever happens, let's try this kind of. But then eventually
Mm-hmm.
some of these things will be taken care of, like will be examined by humanity research labs. People will have to turn to indigenous thought processes,
Mm-hmm.
faith-based thought processes to examine some of the consequences, and that is where I feel that this can guide. But cognition will get impacted. Now we don't have the weaving community as active in the society as it used to be. The
Yeah,
potter
yeah.
community we don't have. Okay, one can say it is contributing to the economic progress, the machines and all of that. But
Mm-hmm.
fundamentally, the human has lost the ability to do some of these things, and that has its own consequence.
Yeah, super interesting. Like what you say about the dementia, Alzheimer's, I hadn't thought about it from that angle. Like, for example, like in the book Outlive, Peter talks about like Alzheimer's and dementia are one of these neuro diseases which we don't have like an answer to. Like
Correct.
compared to like a heart disease which has solutions that we kind of already found, this doesn't have it. And this sort of neurocognition element and the importance of preserving that to avoid that is definitely a strong lever to really think more deeply on.
Yeah,
And on that note, kind of,
but somebody might say, like, okay, I can have a Neuralink chip and then compensate
mm,
for that memory.
That's true.
Again,
Yeah, Musk will have
people
that answer.
also
Yeah,
say
true,
that.
true. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, Musk will say the solar answer for energy and will give the Neuralink answer for this. Oh, okay, fair enough.
Correct.
Okay, yeah, yeah, yeah. That's true. That's
Yeah.
true. Okay, okay. If we are in Musk
So
world,
the
then that's
human
the answer to the
experience
question.
itself
Yeah,
will change. The human
yeah.
experience itself will change when you have a device, a chip that gives you the necessary neurotransmitters and hormones. The
Uh-huh.
human experience might change. Like, for example, simple thing, the apple that we eat now. I
Mm.
am not sure if it's the same apple taste that I used to have, like, say 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
So the experience of eating an apple
Each,
has definitely changed. Yeah, so
yeah.
it will change that way.
Yeah, yeah. Let's see. I mean, that's a quite a uncertain but potentially exciting if you see it exciting, potentially not exciting if you see it from a different world. But let's see.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Thank you so much, Madhusriji. That was a fantastic discussion, giving us a deep down into the background, what happens in the physical Gurukulam, and super exciting for me is this Gurukulam and the way you have kind of built the tech platform around it. So that's been the most exciting part for me to learn about. Thank you. Namaste.
Beautiful. Very happy speaking to you. I think depending on how the person on the other side, the thoughts and words also flow. So that way, it has been a
Thank you.
wonderful experience.